actually, I was telling a few people in the back that I never really thought I would write a book. Books are hard, and we see them in the library here. We see them in Barnes & Noble and on Amazon.com, and they seem like they're a little too, and that's what other people do. Other people write books. And a dear friend of mine, our co-founder of the Orlando Magic, Pat Williams, I was sharing my story with him one day, and he's a person who literally we wouldn't have the Orlando Magic in town if it weren't for Pat Williams. And he adopted he adopted 18 children, all right? And he shared a similar story with me, and he says, Lucas, you need to write a book. And I was like, gosh, I don't know how to write a book. I've never written a book. And he said, you know what, just write it. And I literally just took a year, and I wrote this book, and it had a lot of different titles before this one. The first title, I think, was The First 30, the first 30 years of my life and different things like that. It didn't ring true to me. And I was talking with my mom one day, and I was like, Mom, I don't know. I've written this book. I had maybe over 3/4 of the book written already. And I was like, Mom, I don't have a title for this book, and I'm praying about it, and I'm thinking about it here. And she came up with this title, Living Proof. And I added From Foster Care to the White House and the NBA. And really, as I share the book, and I share this story throughout Central Florida and across the United States, this title means so much because it really isn't about me. It's about what each and every one of us can do, and that each and every one of us can be living proof of whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, whatever our goals are, whatever our dreams are, that each and every single one of us are literally built for something more. This is my family growing up. I'm that crazy guy on the left there with the big hair. Apparently, big hair was cool in the 80s. I didn't dress myself. But my mom is in the middle there. Her name is Dorothy Boyce. And Dorothy is one of those incredible people that without her guidance and without her love, I would never be who I am today. And she had, over the course of 15 years, 40 foster care children in her home. She had over 40 foster care kids. And she adopted 6 of us, and I'm one of her adopted children. And she had 4 of her own biological children. And she remarried my stepdad when I was in 4th grade, and he had 3 daughters. So in all, right now, we're a big family of 13. But back then, when I was about 5 or 6, we were just a single family home with 11 children and 1 mom, trying to do this thing that we call life. And Mom didn't just adopt cute, cuddly kids like me. She adopted those who had special needs as well. So my brother in the middle there, his name's Albert, and he's my favorite brother. And he was a person who, he actually died at a very early age. He had spina bifida, so he was paralyzed from the waist down. And my other sister, Leslie, she's 36 as of today. She turned 36 in November. And she has what we call Prader-Willi syndrome. So she's mentally handicapped, and she has the mind of a 3-year-old. Mom didn't just adopt children or people with special needs. She adopted teenagers. There's this myth in the world that, gosh, if a baby gets past a certain age, they're not lovable, they're not adoptable. And Mom believed totally differently. And so she adopted teenage kids as well. How I got to be in this wonderful family is a unique story. I was born to a 19-year-old African-American woman who abused her body with drugs and was addicted to alcohol. And in order to feed that addiction, she sold her body, and I was the result. We have no clue who my father is. He's just a random person that gave my birth mother either drugs and or money for drugs for selling her body to him. And they didn't know that my birth mother was pregnant for about 3 months in. And so for about 3 months while she was pregnant with me, she continued to do the drugs and take the alcohol and live this crazy life. They found out she was pregnant and put her in the hospital, and I was born very, very premature, weighing about 4 pounds, 6 weeks premature. And there was no one that could take care of me. My birth mother obviously couldn't take care of me. They looked far and wide into Michigan where there might be some family that could assist and be an adequate caregiver, and there was really nobody. And so I was sent to the wonderful foster care home of this incredible human being, Dorothy. And she really raised me to be the person that I am. My first name, the name that was on my birth certificate, it's kind of, we laugh about it now, is Grandy Lowe. So my birth mother, her mind was a little bit baked, and so she kind of just put whatever on the birth certificate. And so when I got to the foster care home, Dorothy asked, hey, do we have to call him that? And they're like, you can call him whatever you want. And there were some neighborhood kids, and their last name was Lucas. They were twins, John and Jonathan Lucas, and they hung out with my brother Bo. And later they tacked on the name Daniel, and so that's how I got the name Lucas Daniel. And I had some struggles growing up, developmental delay because of the different drugs and the alcohol that was in my system. And so I got to kindergarten, and I had to repeat kindergarten after I repeated preschool because of all the things that were in my system. And it was at that point where Mom parachuted in with her loving 2 keys of success that I'll share a little bit later. But that's the general beginning of my life. Born to a call girl, sent to foster care, and struggling as a result of all of that. And some would say, for an individual that was raised in that environment, that they would never succeed or never accomplish anything. But President Barack Obama tells us we do big things. And my mom tells us that we can be living proof. When I was about 12 years old, I started to think about what I wanted to do next in life. And fast forward to when I graduated high school, I remember the day I graduated high school, Mom asked me 2 questions. She said, what's next? Or 3 questions. What's next? What do you want to be? And the third one was, how are you going to get there? And I had a lot of crazy things that I wanted to do, just like a lot of us have dreams and goals. And I told my mom, I'm going to do a lot of different things, but I want to do 3 big things in particular. It's like the first thing I want to do is, this is a really cool house, all right? Manicured lawns, a lot of security. It's got a big lawn out back, got a swimming pool, you know, a big basketball court, tennis court. This is the most powerful symbol of democracy on the face of the earth. And I grew up in the 90s when Bill Clinton was president. Watched his inauguration on TV and was really involved in politics in school. And I said, Mom, you know, I don't know how I get there. We don't have a lot of money. We don't know anybody important. We don't know anybody in politics. But I would love to work at the White House. And then there's this movie called Air Force One that came out in 1997. I remember the day this movie came out because I went to the theater, and you're supposed to sit in the very back of the theater because that's the best view, but for some reason that day I wanted to be on the very front row, full attention to this amazing movie that Harrison Ford played the president in. President Bill Clinton screened this movie in the White House 2 times. That's how much he liked it. And I told my mom, Mom, you know, I don't know what it will take to get there, but I would love to fly on Air Force One. And then the third dream I had was, you know, in the 90s, Michael Jordan was my idol, my hero. This is a person who didn't have the same story as me, but has a similar story to a lot of us, a person that was cut from his high school basketball team when he was 16 years old. And we would have never known him as the greatest player to ever play the game of basketball if he had quit then. And he was a person that really encouraged me growing up. And I loved the Chicago Bulls. I grew up in Missouri. We didn't have our own basketball team. And so I said, look, Mom, I'm like 5'7" on a good day. So I get it. I'm not going to be an NBA star. I'm not as tall as our fellow Dwight Howard here or Kobe Bryant. But I'd love to work for an NBA organization. I know that there's more to just what you see on the court or on the field. I'd love to be a part of this. And Mom shared with me her 2 keys to success. And she didn't just share them with me when I shared with her my dreams when I was 18. The first time she shared with me her 2 keys of success were when I flunked kindergarten. And it was then when she sat me down, gave me a big hug, and she taught me about perspective and about that the things that happen to us don't have to be the things that define us or determine our future. And she said, Lucas, I'm going to give you my 2 keys to success, and I can't promise you success, but I can promise you the likelihood for your success will increasingly rise if you'll do my 2 keys. And her first key was that I could do anything that I put my mind to. And really simply what this means is we get what we focus on. We get what we focus on. We get what we determine in our hearts that we want to do. And she said, Lucas, if you will focus on your goals, if you will give more energy than everybody else, if you'll study harder than everybody else, you can be successful. Second thing that my mom shared with me is that I was to always remember who I was and who I represented. And there's a psalm that says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that he covered us in our mother's womb. And that's essentially my first blessing. With all the drugs and with all the alcohol, I'm blessed to stand before you whole and in my right mind and with a lot of grace on my life. And she shared with me that because of that, it's my job now to act in honor and integrity at all times and in all places, which means for all of you young people in the room, it means that we be good, that we don't lie, that we don't cheat, that we don't steal, that we don't do what the cool crowd's doing, because what they're doing is not going to get us to where we want to go. And so she shared that with me at a young age, and of course she shared that with me again when I was 18, and I told her about my goals. And I told you that my first dream was to work at the White House. I'll tell you very briefly the story. I was an intern 6 months after 9/11, 22 years old, and I thought I had actually checked the box, and I had accomplished this amazing dream, and I was just going to go back to Missouri and live out the rest of my life. And a random chance encounter that you'll read about in the book happened on March 25th, 2002. I was picked to be a part of this photo opportunity with the president. I had no clue it was with the president, and so I'm on the South Lawn, and I'm standing there with, I'm 22, and the other than me, they were about 8, 10, or 12, okay? So they were really young kids, and I didn't really know what was going on. All of a sudden, these guys with earpieces and dark glasses and dark suits show up, Secret Service, and then the president walks out of the Oval Office, which is right behind me there. And then it was at that moment I was like, oh my gosh, this is with the president. Never met anybody famous before in my entire life. And we start taking these photos, and we finish up the photo opportunity, and I start to walk away, and he says, no, let's get a personal photo. And that's this photo here. And I was very excited. I did the brother thing and kind of pulled him in for a hug. You can see his look there like, what the heck is going on? And afterwards, I kind of shook his hand, and this is 6 months after 9/11. I say, sir, the cause is just, and I'm praying for you. And he kind of takes a step back. He's like, thank you, it is. I think that's it. Of course, I go home, and you know, if we had Facebook and Twitter back in 2002, I would have blown up my status with this, but I could think of one person on the face of the planet I could call, and that was my mom, to share this wonderful news with her. Again, I think that's it. Just a neat experience, random chance encounter on the South Lawn. The next day, my boss comes back from a meeting in the Oval Office with the president, and he kind of scratches his head, and kind of gives me this look like, Lucas, you made a real impression on the president yesterday. And of course, my mind goes back to this photo, thinking that I was in trouble because I put my hand on the president. I was about to get fired. And he kind of calms me down. I was like, don't worry about that. He's like, he called me over after this meeting, and he's like, hey, I met this guy in the South Lawn yesterday. What's his name again? He's like, Lucas. He's like, well, what's his story? My boss proceeded to share with him a few of the things I've shared with you. And he said, well, what can we do for him? Let's bring him on board. And that was literally how I got my start. And the reason I share that story for 2 reasons. Number one, you never know who's watching. For us young kids and for us older generation and for us middle-aged in this room today, we all have goals, whether we're young, middle-aged, or older, that we want to accomplish in our lives. But our reputation is our resume. We never know who's watching. We never know who's going to be in a position to help us get to where we want to go. And the second reason I share that story is because it was my first lesson in character. It was my first lesson in leadership. And I live by this motto, and it's not an original motto to me, but it's that we know the true character of a person by how they treat the man that can do nothing for them. I was an intern. I wasn't the president's chief of staff. I wasn't anybody important, yet he took the time to talk. he not only did that, he had the presence of mind to follow up, and then went one step further and said, get this guy a job. You know, and when I think about President Barack Obama and the different things that he has to deal with every single day, he gets up at 5:30 and runs till probably 11:30 at night. He's got tons of meetings in a very, very hostile and important and difficult job. And he's got tons of people trying to hug him and fist bump him, just like I was doing. And for any president to remember some random kid that he meets and to have the presence of mind to remember that person and then go follow up and say, give him a job, says a lot about the man in the Oval Office. And it was my lesson that whether you are a person on the street or a pauper or a president, we all treat each other the same. My second dream was to fly on Air Force One. And over the course of 5 years, I was able to serve the former president in charge of African-American outreach, professional sports outreach. So when the Miami Heat actually won their championship in 2006 and they went to the White House, that was actually the event that I was in charge of. I'm sitting there with Shaq in this room outside of the East Room, and he's just kind of standing there, the 7'3" guy. I'm 5'6", and the president walks in there and he looks up at Shaq. He's like, gosh, you're a lot taller in person than on TV. And then over the course of 2 years that I worked at the White House, I was in charge of a region of the country from Missouri all the way to California. So what that meant was I had 2 BlackBerries. I worked really long hours, but every time the president traveled to one of those states, I was on his plane, and I got to fulfill that second dream. And this is us going to Nebraska with the former Attorney General of Nebraska. And of course, you all know what I do now. I work for the Orlando Magic, Director of Community Relations. Every single day, I get to make an impact in the lives of children throughout Central Florida. And am blessed to be able to, one of our programs at the Orlando Magic is that the players purchase a block of tickets that we give out to nonprofit organizations and those in a needy community. And I remember growing up, I could never afford to go to an NBA game. And yet every single home game that we have here, I'm able to make sure that the lives of our children here in Central Florida are impacted. And it's a special job that I don't take for granted at all. Some men will see things as they are and they will ask why. Some people will see the obstacles. They'll see that they don't have enough money or that they were born into a difficult circumstance, and they'll use it as an excuse to shrink from the opportunity of the moment. But then there are others who will see all of those obstacles and they will ask why not. And for those who ask why not, the sky's the limit.